Well, it's a cold and wet day here in Oklahoma, so I figured it's time to finally get around to servicing the bottom bracket of my Canyon Endurace AL 7.0. You might have seen my previous 1,000 mile reviews. Well, it's taken me 300 miles to get around to doing this. As much as I'd like to ride today, I just kind of need to get this done because a few of you have been asking for this video. A few things just to get you going. I went ahead and cleaned it up. I've had some wet miles, a few wet rides lately, but after 1,300 miles, I don't know if you can quite see in there, my chain checker says I'm right about halfway on my chain life. I gave it as much of a clean as I could, but we're gonna go ahead and work with the bottom bracket. We're gonna take these cranks off. I had the cranks off before, right after that 1,000 mile review video I did, thinking I would be able to get the bottom bracket taken care of. I used this standard bottom bracket wrench that worked with my Shimano 5600. It was too big. So I went ahead and ordered what I thought was the adapter to use that wrench with it. And it turned out it was just a Endurace only. And I've got the Shimano 105 Holotech 2, so I had to hunt and find this adapter. This is the Park BBT 59.2. So we'll use that with the 1/4-inch socket. I haven't gotten a full-size torque wrench. I've just got the small up to 15 Newton meters torque wrench. But let me go ahead and get these cranks pulled off and let's see what this bottom bracket looks like after 1,300 miles. Working on the pinch bolts. Of course, these cranks have been off now 2 times because I was going to work on the bottom bracket with my original wrench. It didn't work. I bought that adapter, so I pulled the cranks off and realized that that wasn't the right size. So I sent those both back. Finally got the Shimano tool, pulled the cranks off to make sure it worked, and then rode a couple hundred miles more before I got around to getting this video done. But at least we'll be pulling off this bottom bracket together for the first time. Okay, here with this pre-tension, I've always learned that you loosen your pinch bolts and then you take this off, and this should only really be hand tight. And just for the sake of ease, when I've taken these off with this tool, since it's separate, I just keep this preload nut attached. There we go. Now dry side crank arm. Not too bad. Of course, I had this off earlier and cleaned it once. Of course, be mindful of the little tab. It's a pretty important piece. I'm gonna go ahead and leave the chain on. Don't feel I need to break the chain just to do this service right now. So let's pull off this dry side crank arm with the chain rings and see what it looks like. There we go, not too bad. Of course, this is another part that I did actually pull off before and clean. I didn't pull it apart, which I think is probably a useful service once in a while, but getting in there with a towel and a toothbrush gets it pretty clean when we do pull it off. All right, now it's time for the moment of truth with this bottom bracket wrench. Just to be clear, it's very clearly noted which way this is tightening this way, and once we get these cranks off, you can see some spots where I haven't cleaned very well. So we're gonna this is the reverse threaded side, which makes this is the standard threaded side, the non-drive side. You can already see, yeah, it needs some attention in there, doesn't it? 1,300 miles. This side, not as much. You can see some water in there from cleaning, so it's definitely time for this service. The other side. Well, that's better. Go. Light's pretty terrible, isn't it? Can't even focus. A little dirt, a little grime. Clean that up. Let's try this other side now. There we go. Maybe I should go get a torque wrench, put these back on. I don't know if I'll get it that tight. Maybe if I put the right kind of grease on the threads, it'll be okay. See if I can set these down on the white table, get an idea for their condition. This is the drive side. Pretty grimy in there. This is the non-drive side. Bearings feel pretty smooth, but they're not certainly where to put it. Let me get this kind of cleaned up for you. All right, well, there's the inside of your bottom bracket shell. I think I had one poster asking for a quick understanding of how the cables are routed. You've got your brake hose exiting right here and your rear derailleur cable exiting right here. So there's no cabling going through the bottom bracket area. I'd say the worst bit of dirt was the inside of the derailleur cage and just this face right here on both sides where everything's seated. Everything cleaned up pretty nicely. I just took a toothbrush with some warm water to try to get in there as best I can. These bearings still feel pretty smooth. There's a little bit of assembly grease that was on the inside of them, but otherwise, I think any grit has been pretty well removed. So I'm gonna pause the video, get the air compressor, and just blow any possible water that might have collected in there. Put a little fresh grease on the surfaces. You'll see this is, of course, asymmetrical. A little space there on the O-ring and a different space there. I didn't feel it necessary to take those rings out. I didn't want to really damage them. This is still a pretty new bike, but just a little bit of fresh grease to get ready for winter riding I think will be fine. And we'll see about getting this put back together all clean. All right, here we are. We're back, ready to put everything together. Drive side crank arm with the chain rings, drive side bottom bracket bearing, bottom bracket shell, non-drive side bottom bracket bearing, non-drive side crank arm, preload bolt, a little bit of grease to just seal everything up. Of course, now these are sealed. It's hard to read, but it says very clearly, do not disassemble. And we're just cleaning the stuff off the outside of it. We're not trying to take anything out of the bearings that are in there. They still roll nice and smooth, but everything's clean. You see there, just a little thin film of grease going on the threads. It's really all I think we need to prevent water from getting in there. to be sure we're doing, can you read that? Right. We're going to tighten reverse thread. I'm just using the tool just to get a nice even spin. I'm not really adding a lot of pressure to it. Making sure my hand would likely try to be a little off center as I thread. I'm just going to work to get it just seated at first. I'll stop there. Little thin coat of grease on these little O-rings on this bottom bracket shell. Make sure I'm putting it in the right direction. I guess I can just install it onto my non-drive side bottom bracket bearing cup. Wish me luck. Same strategy. I'm just going to use the tool to make sure I get nice, even pressure all the way around. Not a lot of torque, just turning it regular so it seats well. Get nice and clean on the inside. And I remember this Titan printing ended up right about here when it was full torque. And this side, the drive side, was the one that seemed the toughest to remove. I don't know if that was a buildup of dirt from the chainring area, or maybe I just had better leverage on the non-drive side. But that could be something I can shoot for to try to get a similar torque without having a measured torque wrench. A little bit of pressure there, and you can see I've got that Titan notice right there at about the 12 o'clock position where it was before. Pretty happy with that. I'm not going to go any further. And I guess I can go off perceived torque on the non-drive side and try to match up. I'm good. I'm good with that. I'm going to add just a thin coat of grease right up here where it's going to interface with that bearing cup, just to protect things on both sides. Don't forget the chain. And just like that. Just a few quick hits, firmly seated right in there, no space. And then with that crank arm at 6 o'clock, I'm trying to hold the phone. I'm not really good at being one-handed. Try to get this crank arm at 12 o'clock. And then we'll do that preload bolt. If you know what you're doing with crank arms, you know this preload bolt does not need a lot of torque. We're just basically seating things up. So no tools necessary, just firm hand pressure. Just to see those bearings up there. And that really thin layer of grease will take up any space in between. I'm just using 2 fingers, turning it tight until it won't go. And I'm happy with that. Take a blue shop towel and kind of wipe off any excess on the outside. All right, let's get those pinch bolts done. Got a torque wrench here. I think it's 12.5. That's what I've used. Or you can go online and just search Shimano crank arm pinch bolt torque, and Google will get you something. It's not rocket surgery. Just a regular Allen key just to get them stopped. And then tend to go from 6 o'clock up. Start with a half turn. The other one, half turn. Oops. The other one, 6 o'clock up, go quarter turn. 6 o'clock up. Oh no, it's not stripped already. There we go. And then it's just a tiny bit at a time on each one until, there you go. A little bit more here. Done. Just double check. We're good. So I think we're all right. Bottom bracket serviced. Cranks feel nice and smooth. Let's put the wheel on and see. I love these through axles. Everything seems nice and smooth, operating appropriately. Good way to tell that you got your job right is you don't need to re-index your gears. So I'm happy with it. If I can bring it up into the middle of the cassette, one-handed. Function the front derailleur. Looks good. Sets you down. See if I can get it in context. I think next up I gotta probably take a look at those brake pads and see about cleaning the brake area. I noticed when I released my front brakes in the wet, I had a little bit of rub for a minute or two, so they didn't open up perfectly every time. So there's probably some dirt up in there. So that should be my next thing. All this cleaning and then riding in the wet and cleaning again. I'm sure this headset's probably gonna need a little bit of attention, but probably a little quick, super quick brake service should be next. And then probably that headset. Thanks for watching.